This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. No one expected her to show up. There were no subpoenas, no leaks, no public statements. But on the seventh day of testimony, Blake Lively walked into the courtroom, not as a spectator, but as a witness. The room fell silent. The media whispered in disbelief. Her career had always seemed untouched by the chaos lurking in the entertainment industry's darker corners. But that illusion shattered the moment she stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she took the oath, then steadied as she stared directly across the courtroom at Sean Diddy Combs. Her first words struck like a thunderclap. "He has taken me to the Diddy tunnels." What followed was more than testimony. It was an unraveling of power, manipulation, and secrets buried beneath mansions, behind velvet ropes, and under city streets. This wasn't about music anymore. It was about survival. It began with whispers, a name on the court schedule that hadn't been leaked or speculated on by the press. When the doors opened and she stepped inside, the energy shifted instantly. Blake Lively, actress, fashion icon, A-lister, wasn't there for publicity. She was a sealed federal witness. The media froze. The gallery held its breath. No one expected this. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the moment was unmistakable. The defense team scrambled. Diddy turned away, his expression tightening as she walked to the stand. 4 years, Blake had been one of the industry's cleanest faces. No scandals, no PR crises. Now, she was about to upend the very narrative that had always protected her. She sat quietly. No glam squad. No handlers. Her voice was soft, hesitant, until the oath was complete. Then she looked straight ahead and delivered 7 words that stunned the courtroom into silence. "He has taken me to the Diddy tunnels." The judge leaned forward. Diddy's team immediately objected. But the prosecution held firm. The witness was protected, and her testimony had already been cleared. Blake continued, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "I've only told this story once, years ago, and even then, I left parts out. But after what I've seen in this courtroom, I can't leave it buried anymore." The courtroom was still absorbing the shock of her presence as she began to lay the foundation. She described first meeting Diddy at a luxury fundraiser in 2014, then again during a music video shoot in Malibu. At the time, it all seemed like casual industry crossover, normal celebrity circles. Nothing unusual. Not until the 2016 after-party following a well-known award show. "He told me, 'Let me show you something my guests never see,'" she recalled. "I assumed he meant art or something silly. I didn't know what he meant until it was too late." That moment, so casual, so dismissive, would come to redefine her reality. Her voice shifted as she described the night. The location, an exclusive post-award party at a private estate in the hills of Los Angeles. Hundreds of guests. Valets in white gloves. Photographers stationed at the gates. Inside, everything glittered, like a designer ad brought to life. But something felt off. "I've been to my share of Hollywood parties," she said, "but this wasn't one of them. It had all the glitz, the music, the champagne, the guest list, but the energy was wrong. Cold. Like everyone was performing." Around 1 a.m., after most guests had left, Diddy approached her with a smile. He handed her a drink and said he wanted to show her something private. She hesitated but followed. What came next was a slow walk through the back of the mansion, past velvet-draped hallways, until they stopped at a wall covered in framed vinyl records. Then, he pulled one of the frames, and the wall shifted open. Behind it was a narrow, industrial elevator. No music, no polish, just a steel box and an eerie silence. "I asked if this was part of the house," she said. He said, "This is the real house." Then he pushed the button, and they went down. She described the descent, long, slow, too deep to be a simple basement. The air changed. The smell, dust, ozone, something metallic, was distinct. Her hands trembled on the stand as she continued. When the doors opened, it wasn't a room. It was a corridor, concrete, echoing, windowless. "I turned around, and the elevator door had already shut," she said. Diddy smiled, like it was a game. The corridor branched in multiple directions. Some hallways led to locked rooms, Others went deeper underground. She described it not as a basement, but as a bunker. She noticed thick doors, soundproof walls, blinking red lights on the ceiling. Some doors were numbered. Others had names. When she asked Diddy where they were, he said nothing, just kept walking. The final room they entered had no windows, only mirrored walls. She caught her breath when she looked up and saw a single camera pointed directly at her. He said this was Studio M. I thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. It was very real. Blake Lively's testimony deepened with every word, dragging the courtroom into a reality far darker and more secretive than anyone had imagined. Blake Lively's testimony plunged deeper into a narrative that sounded too unbelievable to be fiction, yet too vivid and detailed to dismiss. She described the tunnels beneath Diddy's estate as old and industrial, not recently built, reinforced steel in some areas, walls coated in sand-colored paint that was peeling away. The lighting, she said, wasn't residential. It was motion-activated, dim, barely illuminating the narrow paths ahead. But it was the silence that stayed with her. It was the quietest place I've ever been, she said. Like the air itself didn't want to make noise. Diddy walked her through what appeared to be a central hub underground, a junction where several tunnels converged. She remembered coded signs on the walls, M2 entry, red check hole, crimson staging. When she asked what the phrases meant, Diddy simply replied, "You don't need to worry about that." The room they eventually entered, referred to as Studio M, was the only space with visible furniture, but nothing about it felt comfortable or lived in. Just a couch, 2 chairs facing a mirrored wall, and a table with a metal pitcher of water. Through the mirrored glass, Blake could see into an adjacent chamber. Inside, a girl sat alone under a harsh white light. She wore a red wristband, her posture still and eerie. I didn't understand what I was looking at, Blake said. It looked like an audition room, but the girl wasn't performing. She was waiting, like she didn't know anyone could see her. When Blake asked Diddy why they were there, he reportedly smiled and said, "Because this is where the real deals are made." Instantly, Blake said, she felt unsafe. She asked to leave. Diddy told her the elevator wouldn't return for 20 minutes and encouraged her to stay and learn something. But when Blake turned to look through the mirrored wall again, the girl inside had moved. She was no longer sitting but standing, facing the glass directly. She couldn't see me, Blake said, but she was looking like she knew. Something inside her snapped. I knew I had to get out, even if I had to run blind through the tunnels. She found the elevator control panel. It wasn't locked. She slammed the call button repeatedly until the doors opened. As she turned to leave, Diddy stood in the doorway and said just one thing, "Remember, this room sees everything." Blake testified that she didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. She never told the full story, until now. She described the air in Studio M as freezing, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. I could feel it in my teeth, she said. Not fear. Not adrenaline. Something colder, like something had already happened before I even arrived. Standing inside that mirrored room, she experienced a disturbing realization. The girl in the other chamber wasn't alone. A shadow moved just beyond the glass, something not quite human, not quite a silhouette. Then a person stepped into the room, dressed in gray slacks, gloves, and a headset. They didn't speak. They walked up to the girl, whispered something in her ear, and left. The girl nodded once, then turned back toward the mirror, directly into Blake's line of sight. She couldn't have seen me, Blake said softly in court, but she was looking at me, and she didn't look scared. She looked resigned. It was in that moment Blake realized Studio M wasn't just surveillance, it was a stage. Not for performances, but for processing. She noticed a second chair, an old CRT monitor, and a red folder on the table. The folder had no name, just a strange symbol, a capital C intersected by a single line. Then came the moment that broke her. A speaker in the corner crackled to life with static, then a voice. Not instructions. Not music. Her own voice. It was a recording of her laughing from earlier at the upstairs party. She heard herself say, "Oh my God, you're ridiculous." It was a moment she remembered, an offhand comment during small talk. "I realized in that moment," she whispered. "They were listening long before we went underground." She looked at Diddy, who hadn't moved during her entire testimony, then back at the judge. That's when I stopped feeling like a guest and started feeling like a product. With that, she ran to the elevator, slamming the call button until the doors opened. But what haunted her more than anything she saw or heard was what Diddy said as she stepped inside. Now you know why people stay quiet. The elevator closed, but the silence followed her home. 2 days later, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a black envelope. When she opened it, a single photograph slipped out, a surveillance image showing her standing in Studio M, one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide in horror. In the corner, a time code and a red stamp. Witness file HLTM. Beneath the photo, a small slip of paper read, "Stars don't talk. They shine." Blake panicked. She didn't call her team, her husband, or even her lawyer. She locked the envelope away in a drawer and never touched it again until the trial. "I buried it," she said in court, "because I wanted to forget." Blake lively admitted that for years, she tried to convince herself what she had seen wasn't real. "I convinced myself it wasn't real, that maybe I dreamt it, maybe I misunderstood," she told the court. But that illusion shattered when she heard Cassie's testimony, saw the footage, the tunnel, and the names. "I couldn't lie to myself anymore." She confessed that years later, in a moment of fear and vulnerability, she told her sister in whispered confidence, "If anything